When you think about any American city, it's really a living map of contradictions.
It really is.
I mean, think about your own day. You can drive for an hour and go from feeling completely at home to feeling like a tourist, and then suddenly, you feel so out of place, you're actually afraid for your own security.
That experience is it's the signature of modern urban life. We all have this sort of internal GPS for class and wealth.
Yeah, you just know.
You know exactly where the Louis Vuitton store is, and you know where the small, deteriorating shops are. The sources put it so well, they say everyone knows where we don't belong.
And that feeling, that fragmented, divided landscape based on race, class, all of it, that's what we're diving into today.
The big surprise from the material, for me, was that this isn't just the sum of individual choices.
Precisely. That's the first thing you have to understand. This is not an accident. It's not organic. It is the direct product of a multitude of governmental policies.
So it was designed. The legal structure itself created this fragmentation, and it built what you could call two nations, rich and poor, white and black.
So our mission today is to unpack that legal architecture. We're going to trace how American law defines city power to create these divisions, and then we'll get to the solutions the sources propose for building community.
Okay, let's do it.
So where do we start? What are the legal roots of all this?
It really begins with the fundamental status of a city in American law. You see, unlike in Europe, American law treats cities as just subdivisions of the states.
Just a subdivision, not its own entity.
Not really, and that's not just a technicality. It's a source of real powerlessness.
Yeah.
And the way states carved up these subdivisions, well, it helps separate metropolitan residents into different, sometimes hostile groups.
And that's a huge shift from, say, historical towns, right? I was reading in the sources about the medieval town,
Yeah.
which was this corporate entity intermediate between the state and the individual. It had its own power.
It had inherent rights. That intermediate power was completely crushed in the American system, mostly out of deep distrust.
Distrust of what?
In the 19th century, it was a massive suspicion of city power. They associated it with corruption, with immigrant political machines.
Yeah, okay.
And so the legal response was to narrow the definition of what a city could do. They became strictly public political entities, completely subordinate to the state.
And this is where that legal concept, Dillon's rule, comes in.
That's it exactly. Dillon's rule is still largely with us today, and it basically says a city only has the power the state explicitly gives it.
So if the state doesn't say you can do something,
You can't. Think of the state as a really strict parent. The city is the child, and it can only do what's on its approved list of chores.
that's a great analogy. And that's a world away from how federal power works, which is interpreted so broadly.
A night and day difference. So you have this framework where cities are intentionally kept weak. And the sources say this leads to a situation where local powerlessness appears to be an inevitable, desirable feature of modern life.
The system is designed for them to be weak. So if the central cities are legally powerless, where did that power go?
It shifted. The states enabled it to shift to smaller, often wealthier subdivisions.
The suburbs.
The suburbs. They filled that power vacuum. The states legally authorized them to use powerful tools like zoning, redevelopment authority, but with a very specific instruction
Which was?
to foster their own prosperity,
Yeah.
even if it is one at the expense of their neighbors.
Wow. So it's a competitive framework from the start. Prosperity at the expense of your neighbors. What was the secret sauce that let the suburbs win that fight?
It was all about association. They associated themselves not with messy public politics, but with private values.
What do you mean by private values?
Things like home and family and private property. They sold themselves as these quiet sanctuaries, and this privatized picture was incredibly effective. It convinced states and courts to give them a ton of autonomy to defend their borders and their wealth.
So defending your town became the same as defending your own home?
Exactly. And they got the legal tools to do it.
What were the big ones?
3 critical tools. First, exclusionary zoning. Things like requiring huge lot sizes or banning apartments, which is really just a filter for income.
Right.
Second, strong legal protections against being annexed by the central city. And third, maybe the most important, tying property tax revenues exclusively to the land within their own borders.
And that's the one that creates what the sources call the boundary effect, where school funding and everything else is tied to those lines on a map.
That's the effect, absolutely. Local government law basically adopted this privatized idea of a boundary. It's not a street sign anymore. It's a fence between two private owners. It's our problems from their problems, our money from their money, our future from their future.
This whole idea is built on a really specific assumption about what a city is. The sources call it the centered subject. What does that mean?
It just means the law treats a city like a self-contained, self-interested individual, like a person.
An actor in a marketplace.
Right. And it can make decisions based purely on its own self-interest. And that model works, pretty well for a homogeneous, wealthy suburb that's successfully walled itself off.
But it completely falls apart for a central city.
It's the total opposite. A central city is an inherently diverse public place. You can't define a downtown business district as a private sanctuary. It just doesn't work.
Okay, so the centered subject model fails. What's the alternative?
The sources propose starting with the situated subject, which is a fancy way of saying that a town's identity is formed through its relationships with other towns. They're mutually constitutive.
So they define each other. Where's the key relationship there? What does the closed-off rich suburb depend on the big city for?
Well, this is the really deep insight. The suburb's ability to be so exclusive is completely dependent on the central city next door being open and accepting everyone else.
Oh, wow.
The closed community is literally defined by the open one.
That's the aha moment. The legal system almost never sees that, though. Is there any case where a court actually stepped in and recognized this?
Absolutely. The big one is the Mount Laurel case from the New Jersey Supreme Court.
Okay.
The court basically said local needs are constructed regionally. It forced towns to accept their fair share of the region's need for low and moderate income housing. It was a direct attack on that centered subject idea.
But the sources push it even further, don't they? They talk about a postmodern subject.
They do. It's a more radical idea. It says we should just get rid of our reliance on these fixed borders altogether. I mean, look at a modern sprawling area like Los Angeles or these huge edge cities that pop up.
Right. In those places, we're already ignoring the boundaries in our daily lives. My commute, where I shop, where I go for fun. I'm not thinking about town lines.
Nobody is. You're thinking about convenience. Your relevant space is defined by what you can conveniently reach in your car. So if we live our lives based on drive time, why are we still taxing and governing based on lines drawn 100 years ago?
So what's the prescription?
The law should stop building its system on residency and boundaries. It should treat people more like a switching center for all the networks of influence in a region.
And this shift in thinking is what lets us start talking about community building.
Exactly. Community building becomes the new mission. It's about fostering public freedom and reducing all this tension and fear, and it focuses on three big areas: land use, education, and security.
Okay, let's take land use first. This means moving away from zoning for conformity.
And towards zoning for diversity. This is the whole new urbanism movement inspired by people like Jane Jacobs.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, the new urbanists want to reverse the segregation of functions. They want multi-use environments where your home, your work, and shops are all within walking distance. Grid streets that prioritize people, not just cars, and a whole mix of housing types in one neighborhood.
So apartments next to single-family homes, rentals, and owner-occupied.
All of it together.
And here's the crazy paradox the sources point out. Almost everything they want to do, it's currently illegal.
It is. It's illegal because our current functional zoning laws demand separation. It's a legal straitjacket.
Okay, what about education? The fragmentation there is just a huge driver of inequality.
A massive driver. Right now, the law ties school funding directly to school district borders. So schools end up functioning like voluntary associations for people who can afford to buy into the right tax base.
So the solution is a political volcano.
Yes. It's dismantling that legal tie between a school's resources and the property values inside its borders.
How would that even work?
Community building requires region-wide funding and region-wide admission policies. The sources mention a controlled choice plan as one example. You'd rank your school preferences, but a regionally funded district would manage admissions to ensure balance and diversity.
So resources go to all children.
Not just our children inside this one arbitrary line.
It shifts education from a commodity you buy to a regional public good. Okay, finally. The elephant in the room that drives so much of this: fear of crime.
Right. The main response we have to crime now, if you have money, is isolation. You move to a low-crime suburb, you build a gated community, you hire private security.
And the cost of that isolation strategy is?
It's immense. It just makes economic decline worse in poor neighborhoods because all the capital and people leave. And it fuels this pervasive fear of the other that is the hallmark of fragmentation. The walls go up and understanding goes down.
So community building means reversing that, instead of spending money to insulate the safe places.
You shift those resources to a region-wide focus on crime prevention in high-crime areas. You adopt things like community policing. The idea is that collaboration between wealthy suburbs and central cities would start to erase those invisible lines that mark off dangerous areas.
It would help reopen huge parts of the city for everyone.
Exactly. It would reduce the very fear that drives so much of the segregation in the first place.
It's just such a compelling way of looking at it. When you step back, you see that this fragmented city we all live in, it's an astonishing feat of social engineering.
It really is. It was built piece by legal choices that prioritized local self-interest.
So to reverse it, we have to change the legal definition of a city itself, away from that self-interested, centered subject.
And toward a definition that recognizes we're all interdependent, that we share a regional destiny.
But at the very heart of this, as the sources point out, there's a conflict between two different ideas of freedom.
Absolutely. The system we have now, it champions consumer choice. It's the freedom to move, to buy the best package of services, the safest streets, the best schools.
What a system based on community building offers a different kind of freedom.
It does. It expands freedom for most people because it refuses to define choice only in terms of consumption and exclusion.
And what's a crucial freedom that our current system really denies millions of people?
It denies them a freedom that's currently only available to the wealthy. The freedom to stay put.
The freedom to stay put.
The freedom to stay in your neighborhood without being forced out by fear of violence or by failing schools. That choice, that freedom should exist for everyone, not just for those who can afford to live in the most legally fortified suburb.
And that's really the ultimate challenge for you, the listener, to think about from this deep dive. What kind of public-private mix do you want your own city to nurture? Is the vitality and diversity of real metropolitan life worth the incredible political effort it would take to redefine our boundaries? We'll leave you with that thought.